Alright, YouTube, old Vlad Putin himself has come out in his last sort of State of the Union address to say, oh, Russia doesn't need enemies, Russia needs friends. We want to work with the United States to fuck these terrorists. Good. It'd be great to have, like, the Spetsnaz and the US Marines working together in some of these theaters. It would be, what's the alternative? I would ask all these people that want to blame Russia for, like, Clinton's downfall, whatever it happens to be, you just don't like Russia in general. What exactly is the alternative? The stale old Cold War mentality? You want to go back to like the Dwight Eisenhower level of flying a bunch of nuclear bombers at some failsafe, a few miles from Russian airspace 24/7 for no reason? Or do you want a nuclear conflict? Because those are sort of your only two other choices other than trying to at least be somewhat lukewarm in friendliness towards Russia. I'll say this for I hope the last time that I have to reiterate this. I'm not a fan of Russian foreign policy. I'm fully aware of the fact that Russia is still playing the grand chessboard game. One look at what they've done insofar as sending planes to the edge of our airspace, ships to the edge of our airspace, some of the rhetoric that's come out of Russia. Yeah, it's clear. The Cold War is still technically going on. But do we want that war to go hot? I say no. Unless if you're suicidal, okay, that's fine. And if you're like really, really into the post-apocalyptic stuff, maybe you're like, yeah, maybe a nuclear war wouldn't be so bad, real life fallout or something like that. Okay, that's fine. But living more, I guess, in reality here, that's really what ends up happening if we don't have at least some warming of relations with the Russians. Now, in an ideal world, we should be able to get along with Russia enough so that the inevitable nuclear conflict that will break out at some point hopefully doesn't involve NATO and Russia. Because that would be the big cheese of all disasters. You're talking about many thousands of nuclear weapons. As opposed to, let's say, the United States dickwags with China. Double teams them along with the Russians. It wouldn't end the world. It'd still be a huge disaster, but ultimately most of humanity would survive. We'd barely notice the difference other than the world would be short one communist dictatorship. That being said, I'm not, barking around for nuclear war. Oh, you just nuke the commies or something. It's kind of a mixed model at this point anyway. But if Trump can restore some semblance of relations with Russia as they existed maybe after the fall of the Soviet Union, between that and the invasion of Georgia by Russia, and I think it was 2007 or something like that. If we can go back to that pre-invasion sort of mentality, then it doesn't matter if it's Putin, who is a tin horn billionaire oligarch, let's face it, or anybody else in power in Russia. We can at least enjoy normal relations. There might be some frostiness, there might be some hostility. Yes, the Russians conduct cyber intrusions into U.S. corporations all the time. Do you think we do not do that to the Russians as well? Of course we do. They just happen to be perhaps slightly better at it than we are. Of course, I would point one thing out, though. Insofar as the Cold War rhetoric goes, let us not forget one important point here. Back in the 1950s and 60s, the U.S. military and political system lied to the American people and said there was a missile gap between the U.S. and Russia, that they were way ahead of us, they had way more nukes, they were better, and to justify increased spending on our nuclear program and related things, the aeronautics and so forth. I don't necessarily believe it when they say, oh, well, the Russians and Chinese are so much better at hacking than us. No, I think that what they're doing is segueing into a new era of war and trying to justify the increased government control and funding necessary to actually skyrocket ahead of Russia and China, which is exactly what we did with the mythical missile gap. The only missile gap that ever existed arose in the 80s. Because of our Star Wars program sort of stuff, which is a sort of an extension of the madman strategy of Clinton's friend Kissinger, who Trump unfortunately met with, and he shouldn't have done that. Because we got them so paranoid, they spent themselves into oblivion thinking that we actually were far ahead of where we actually were. Like, we were planning to put nukes in space and so forth and have a moon laser and all of these other weird sort of James Bond things, and which was never actually true. A lot of that was just hyperbole. A lot of it was empty rhetoric, vague statements delivered by Reagan, who was old, and the Soviets worried he might very well be slightly demented at the time and be crazy enough to start a nuclear war. So they decided they needed a bigger deterrence. That actually drained their coffers so quickly it helped add to the problems of the late-era Soviet Union. But, no, I don't have any problem with the Russian people. The Russian government, insofar as it operates within Russia. I'm like, well, yeah, there's a lot of moral laws there. It's obviously not the most hospitable climate for liberty, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. The idea that because some foreign state doesn't have enough freedom, that we just start wagging our freedom boner around and things magically get better. It didn't work in Iraq, it didn't work in Libya, it didn't work in Egypt, it's not working in Syria. It never works. The only way that we've dealt with these countries before to get them to back down is economically. We don't do it through military might unless it's an actual standardized war. We go in, we start bombing, we overrun the entire region. You know, you would think of essentially World War II or any conflict before that where we're doing just fine. You look at Korea or Vietnam or Persian Gulf, we go in with massive manpower, massive technological superiority. Even the invasion of Iraq, shock and awe, worked great. It really showed off our toys to the world. We utterly decimated Saddam's forces in very, very short order. One of the top militaries in the world, actually. They had U.S. weapons, too. They weren't little assholes running around with sticks in the desert. They had a fairly developed military, and we crippled them completely, almost without retaliation. It was what happened after, during the political crisis that followed, that we got screwed. That's why we lost in Iraq. And we did. Make no mistake, we lost in Iraq. We completely fucked Saddam. We accomplished that mission objective. Once we extended the mission to be, we will occupy, rebuild, and restabilize, that's when we lost. Because the United States military is not capable of doing that. The U.S. military destroys things. It doesn't rebuild things very well. You get these contractors in, they end up embezzling a bunch of money. There were trucks full of gold bars driving around, and trucks full of bales full of U.S. dollars floating around, and euros, and it was just a clusterfuck of corruption. All the bureaucrats and war generals probably embezzled all that stuff. Some of that stuff, it's like remember when the Pentagon lost trillions of dollars right before 9/11, and they're going to have a hearing and everything, and then everybody mysteriously forgot about that. As far as Russia goes, yeah, they're corrupt. So's our government. That's what we need to understand. We need to reform things at home and stop wagging our dick around overseas. If there's a country that has started a war with us, that has actually attacked us in some meaningful way, or that has attacked one of our allies in a meaningful way, yeah, kick their ass. Defensive warfare. Go curb stomp them completely. And we have the capability to do that as long as we don't overextend our objectives. But worrying about Russia, which so far has not fired a nuke at us, hasn't actually violated our airspace, just, skirts our airspace, which has been going on for half a century at this point, we do that to them too. What did we do in Chinese waters, so-called, in the South China Sea? China's a nuclear state. A standardized power, not the greatest of powers in the world, but they've got a huge manpower surplus. They have a halfway decent air capability. They're building a bunch of fortified islands in the South China Sea because they want to claim the whole area. What does the U.S. do? And this is under Obama, supposedly a total peacenik. We sail a bunch of naval vessels in around the waters of those islands and say, no, we're not recognizing your nautical claim over this region at all. It's international water. What the fuck are you going to do? Fire on the U.S. Navy? And lo and behold, they don't fire on the U.S. Navy. It's a little tit for tat. When we fly near Russian airspace, they fly near our airspace. We exchange some words. It's been going on for a long time. Half these people enjoy it. The grand chessboard is almost like a non-stop erection for those who actually are in positions of political power. I think that most U.S. presidents and most Russian premiers deeply enjoy the hostility. It's sort of a frenemy status that they're feuding. They don't actually intend to press the little red button, but they get all hot and bothered thinking about it. Oh man, I could kill so many people. That sort of gives them an adrenaline rush thinking about the possibility of a nuclear conflict. Now, you get some psycho or a pacifist, by the way, in office, you probably do have a nuclear war at that point. Somebody backs down from the grand chessboard, they get fucked. The Soviets learned this the hard way. When the Soviet Union was beginning to break apart, they were left with the options of we go in and purge and enslave people, or we relinquish these pieces of land. They chose the latter because their leadership was not insane, but that comes with its own problems, let's face it. All of a sudden, their borders had shrunk, their population was lower, their economic output was definitely lower. They no longer had access to Ukrainian grain, to some of these minerals in Central Asia that they kind of wanted, as well as some of their shoreline region in the Baltic states. They regressed significantly. Their ability to play grand chessboard now is hanging by a thread, honestly. If they had lost much more land, you know, if the Siberians suddenly said, oh, we want independence now too, we just want to herd reindeer, enough of these nuclear things, yeah, Russia would be a third world country at that point. It'd be funny. But no, I don't have a big dick for the Russian people to shove down their ass or anything like that. You get some of these warmongers, the Cold Warriors, like, oh, Russia, evil, we gotta do something about these fucking Russians. I don't even realize, remember Obama back in 2012 when sparring with Romney, he's like, oh, the Cold War's over. No, they're not a foe, they're just a competitor. And then we have, fast forward 4 years, Obama and Clinton, all these others, oh, Russia's evil, Russia's responsible for all of our problems. Oh, they're gonna, it's just a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, you shouldn't trust the Russians, and the Russians shouldn't trust the U.S. We're still playing Cold War here. But we don't need to constantly perturb one another on a day-to-day basis. It just doesn't make sense. It might build a sense. Can you imagine if the U.S. and Russia were to team up with collectively way more nukes than the rest of the world combined, huge land area, massive manpower, developed technology? Can you imagine what we could rule the world together if we really wanted to? All the other states would end up being destroyed or they'd be vassals. It's within our capability to do. Only the constant enjoyment of the grand chessboard even keeps this from happening. Oh, they were commies long ago. We used to be actual capitalists. Now both states are run by just globalist interventionism, which thankfully is beginning to break down. But yeah, I mean, who cares about what happened decades and decades ago? I can understand why the Eastern Europeans want us to go hard against Russia. And I don't think we should, abandon them to the wolves and say, oh, well, fuck you, you're on your own. Same goes for Ukraine. We should have admitted them to NATO, honestly. But at the same time, constantly perturbing the Russians, I would think that would make them more aggressive, more likely to harm our allies in Eastern Europe. If they blitzkrieg the Polish, yeah, we're going to respond with military force. Russia and the U.S. and most of the world would be annihilated in the coming fire of nuclear Armageddon. It'd be very funny. World War III gets fought over some, Eastern European, largely agrarian economy, like Belarus or Latvia or something like that. It's possible. That's actually going to happen. That region of the world has already spawned 2 world wars, let's face it. The First World War, you're looking at Austrian and the Yugoslavian, former Yugoslavian states. I think it was Bosnia or something. World War II, it's of course Germany and Poland. It's sort of this region where the Western world and Eastern world meet. And so it's the constant flashpoint of problems. We have a second front now, by the way, in Asia that people are trying to ignore. Basically, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, some of these states, and then China, North Korea, and some of their vassals, maybe the Burmese or something like that on the other side. It's very, very funny to think about. We've actually added a new flashpoint in the world, which just is going to speed our annihilation. But no, I don't think we should constantly warmonger after the Russians. The idea that it would benefit anybody in this world to have a conflict between the 2 of our states, yeah, I think it's mythological. You see some of these far leftists now, it's actually funny to see them turn into McCarthyists. What they don't understand is that what they're saying is jingoism. It's literal warmongering. They don't seem to understand this. They think that Obama's black and has a D after his name, so he can't conduct warfare. If he kills somebody, it's with love, rather than with hate, like Bush did or something. That's about all. Peace out.